Hello and welcome to another edition of the 1996 Rewind. This is where I look at films from 1996 that are turning 30 years old here in 2026. Hard to believe it's been 30 years since this franchise was just wrapped up last year. Well, wrapped up, kicked off, and that is the Mission Impossible franchise. When you look back, the original Mission Impossible film feels like a little bit of an outlier to where we ended up in recent years. The film's kind of tied together. This one was directed by Brian De Palma, introduced Tom Cruise as Ethan Hunt, brought in John Voight as Jim Phelps, uh, Henry Czerny as Kittredge, who later appeared in the later films. Of course, this was the first start for Ving Rhames as Luther, who carries out throughout the franchise. But this one, a lot different. You start out with a team and something happens, and a lot of the big names, Kristen Scott Thomas, Emilio Estevez, are in this film, but not for very long, and then kind of goes down to Ethan Hunt. I remember at the time thinking this was kind of a fun action film, not being real familiar with the classic television series. I think this movie tried to appeal to those older viewers at the time who had been fans of the TV series while also kicking off something new. Obviously, a more radical departure in the second film, which came from John Woo and kicked off just 4 years later. But this original Mission Impossible film, no longer the best of the franchise, probably not even top three for me, but it is kind of an iconic classic in its own way. And part of that landscape, that it was a pretty big 1996, and it was a pretty big 1996 for Tom Cruise. This kicked off a franchise that would be part of his life for the last 30 years. He also is in a big Oscar bait movie this year, which is one that we will talk about in future installments. But we've started off with a couple of big kind of banger action films: Independence Day, Twister, Mission Impossible. There was a lot going on in 1996, but there are a lot of different genres, and we will start to dive into that, although not next week. We also have kind of an action-oriented banger next week as well. But Mission Impossible, if you want to look back on how it all started for Tom Cruise as Ethan Hunt, the film turns 30 years old this year.